All right, good afternoon, scholars. I hope you're all doing well. We are going to go over history lesson 1. So I want you to play this YouTube video and I want you to keep playing it so you can hear my voice, but then I want you to navigate to the platform, Google Classroom, and follow along with my voice. So right now I want you to continue playing this video, but go to Google Classroom and open PMA Diverse Learner Modified Work. Go to Classwork and go to History Modified History Lesson 1, Frederick Douglass. And I'll give you a minute to get there. All right, so you should have open Frederick Douglass, and at the top it should say abolitionist. So while I'm reading this out loud, I want you to follow along with the words. So this YouTube video should not be up. Frederick Douglass, the text should be up, and you should be following along with the words with your eyes, as long as a pencil, a pen. Just make sure you're following along with the words as I read. So let's look at the top. And I want to remind you what an abolitionist is. An abolitionist was a person that fought for slaves to be freed. An abolitionist could have been white, could have been black, but it was somebody that in some way helped or believed in freeing slaves and making them independent. So let's look at the top. It says Frederick Douglass, which is obviously the person we're going to be reading about. If you've never heard of him, then you will know. So I'm going to read at the top, and again, I want you to follow along with my voice and the words. Frederick Bailey was born into slavery in Maryland in 1818 without ever knowing his parents. He grew up under cruel slave masters and witnessed harsh treatment and abuse of fellow slaves. Luckily for Frederick, he was sold to a new set of masters while he was still young, and his new slave master's wife began to teach him how to read. When his slave master found out about the schooling, he forbade Frederick from taking any more reading lessons because it was against the law to teach slaves to read. Despite this, Douglass continued to teach himself to read and write by reading books, newspapers, and pamphlets. Frederick got a bigger taste of freedom the more he learned, and he planned to escape slavery as soon as possible. Okay, we're in the second paragraph. In 1838, Frederick dressed up as a sailor and boarded a train to head north out of Baltimore, Maryland. He arrived in New York City and immediately embraced his freedom. A free black named Anna had helped Frederick escape, and the two married once he was free. They also then adopted the last name Douglass and moved further north to New Bedford, Massachusetts for more safety. As a free black, Douglass joined abolitionist groups in his area. And if we remember, abolitionist groups are just a group of people that wanted slaves to be free. So an abolitionist is a person, an abolitionist group is a group of people. He quickly gained a reputation for his public speaking skills and began touring the country to speak out against slavery. Douglass captivated audiences as a living example that slaves could become educated just like whites. Douglass spoke about his life and his anti-slavery views, and he gained a large following over time. His speeches were almost always attended by a large number of people, many of whom were shocked to see a former slave who could speak so well. In 1845, Douglass published his autobiography titled Narrative of the Life of Frederick Douglass, an American Slave. Douglass's book offered a first-person account of the reality of slavery, which helped many people see the horrors of enslaving people. The account became a bestseller and was even translated so that it could be sold in multiple countries in Europe. Douglass had caught the nation's attention, and he used this platform to also speak out about women's rights and Ireland's rights to be free from England. All right, a fast fact. Douglass started his own newspaper called the North Star. Another fast fact. Tired of constantly worrying about his freedom, Douglass moved to Europe for a few years. Eventually, a group of abolitionists purchased Douglass's freedom, and he was able to return to the United States to join his family as a free man. Okay, we're on the next page. When the Civil War broke out, Douglass focused all of his efforts of abolishing slavery and recruiting blacks to join the war effort. He even met with President Abraham Lincoln once to speak out about an issue of equality for black soldiers. When the war ended, Douglass continued his work with blacks, offering his assistance to help them establish themselves, and he also continued to travel, speak, and publish newspapers. After attending a meeting on women's rights one day in 1865, Douglass passed away of a heart attack upon returning to his home. Frederick Douglass did what most people thought was impossible by becoming educated while still a slave and using his education to gain fame and importance. He used the influence he gained to fight for the peaceful abolition of slavery, and he stressed the importance of educating slaves because he believed education was the ticket to freedom. That last sentence is very, very, very powerful. All right, so now that we've read that out loud, you might want to rewind this and listen to it again, because sometimes it takes more than once to read something to understand it a little better. I have to do it all the time. But if not, or if you're ready to move on, I want you to go back to the classwork, and I want you to open the modified questions, Frederick Douglass. And I'll give you a second to do that. So you should have open modified questions, Frederick Douglass, lesson 1. Okay, I'm going to read these questions out loud, and I might explain a little bit about some of them. However, I think that for the most part, you'll be able to come up with answers on your own. I know it's kind of hard sometimes to type. However, the way that I want you to type would be the way that you would say it out loud. So let's pretend I'm in front of you, or your parent or guardian or friend is in front of you. And if I were asking you a question, how would you say it out loud in your own words? That's how I want you to type it. And then when you're done typing it, read it out loud to yourself to make sure that it makes sense. So let's go. Always read the directions. The directions. After reading the text article, which we just did, answer the following questions using complete sentences. Number 1, according to the first paragraph of the text, how did Frederick Douglass learn to read? So as you can see, what's bolded is the first paragraph of the text. So if you don't remember, you're going to go back to the text and the first paragraph and answer, how did he learn to read? Number 2, explain how Douglass became a free man. Number 3, explain how Frederick Douglass caught the nation's attention. So how did people start paying attention to him? What did he do that made people interested in him being a black slave? Number 4, explain how Douglass took action during the Civil War. And if, I don't think I mentioned this while we were reading, but the Civil War, if we remember, the northern states in the United States of America were for freeing slaves, and the southern states wanted to keep slaves. So the Civil War was a war between the North and the South to free or keep slaves. And as the lessons go on, there will be more information about that. Number 5, summarize Douglas's life after the Civil War. So what was his life after the Civil War? Number 6, explain the meaning of the term recruit. What does recruit mean? So you're going to have to go back to the text and find it. And number 7, how is the passage organized? And your choices are chronological order, cause and effect, compare and contrast, description, or problem solution. And then you need to use evidence from the text to explain your answer. You know how to use evidence from the text. You go back to the text and you find exactly the sentence or statement that is supporting your answer. So I put in blue just a reminder what these things mean. And I'm going to read them out loud and maybe give you some examples. And if you need more examples of them, then you can just email myself and just say, Miss Spindler, can you give me more examples? I don't really understand this one, or I don't understand that. So the first one is chronological order. So texts are organized in a certain way, right? Just like how you get ready every day. It's organized. You don't wake up and eat dinner and then put your PJs on and then go to school and then brush your teeth. There's an order. So just like you have an order in your life, text has an order to make sense, right? So chronological order, events happen in order. An example is writing out a timeline of your life. So let's say you're writing an essay on the timeline of your life. You would start from when you were a baby up until where you are now. That's chronological order, the order that your life has happened. Cause and effect is a relationship between events or things. So one thing happened because of the other. So, for example, a cause would be he broke his arm, and the effect of him breaking his arm is that he had to put a cast on. Description is describing something or telling you something. So, for example, writing about something or describing elephants. So let's say you're writing an essay and you just talk about elephants because it's your favorite animal or something, or basketball or whoever, whatever. You would say what an elephant is, what an elephant looks like, what an elephant eats, how it interacts in its environment, what environment does it live in, just things like that. So a description is just an essay that describes a particular topic. Problem solution is having a problem and giving a solution. So for example, if there is a problem that there's violence in schools, a solution could be hire more school security. I just noticed that I missed compare and contrast. So I'm going to have to add that in there. Compare and contrast is when you have two things and you're comparing the similarities and you're comparing the differences. So an example that I can give would be like, this is just kind of relevant to something that you would know. So President Obama and President Trump, right? So if I were writing a paper on comparing them and contrasting them, you would be writing a paper about how are they similar and how are they different. Another compare and contrast could be like the saber-toothed tiger, which was a dinosaur in the prehistoric times, which saber-toothed tigers do not live anymore, but they're a relative of the tiger, right? So you could write an essay, a compare and contrast essay on how saber-toothed tigers and today's tigers are similar. They both have fur, they both have teeth, they both ate this. And you would also explain how they're different. And I would have to do the research in order to compare, but just from thinking, like saber-toothed tigers, I know their teeth were significantly bigger. They just have different features. So that is what compare and contrast is. So now I want you to answer the questions. And if you have any issues, you can email me, and have a great day. All right, bye.